Now we're going to have a look at the importance of being a critically reflective teacher. Critical reflection is an ability we all need to try and develop in our teaching and to help us improve. And let's look at why. So it's about the process of learning to reflect on our strengths and our weaknesses as teachers. And this goes both ways. Some teachers find it very easy to reflect on the things they do well and find it very difficult to think about the things they don't do as well. And other teachers find the absolute opposite to be true, and they're really full of doubts, full of self-doubts, really criticize themselves, can come up with a very long list of weaknesses and possibly a much shorter, or if any, strengths. And I would suggest the balance for everyone is somewhere in the middle. I think often with more experienced teachers tend to be more aware of their strengths because they've had time to correct their weaknesses or not. We can also become fossilized in our approach, and we can, an experienced teacher that does not practice self-reflection and critical reflection can be a very poor teacher indeed. And I think that as learners we've all suffered, and I have to use the word suffer, we've all suffered poor teachers throughout our educational stage in our life, and through when we were at school, and the experience of the damage that can do to you as a learner of when you have a very poor teacher. And I think as soon as teachers start becoming aware of the need for critical reflection and for self-assessment in their own practice, it really gives us a chance to make improvements and improve our teaching practice, and above all, improve the learning experience for our learners. So let's have a look. Walsh said in 2006 in a study he carried out with teacher learners, it said a critical self-evaluation based on teacher-generated data is of considerable value as a process of consciousness raising and enhancing understanding. What does that mean? It means that to adopt a reflexive mindset, we need to examine our own teaching practice, and we need to think about the strengths and weaknesses as we have previously mentioned. And therefore, through looking at our strengths and weaknesses, we will gain understanding of how we teach and the things we do well and the things we do badly. I will also say that often the weaknesses and the strengths that you think you have do not tally up with the reality of when you actually start looking into, when you actually start listening to a recording of yourself and the way you present things. And I think we can often think, my goodness, do I really do that? Do I do this? And that's when we can really examine how we teach. So we're really weighing up here the good points and the not so good points, the weaker points, okay? As I say, the balance is normally somewhere in the middle. But let's give an example now. Let's have a look at an example. This is how long we talk in class. Now, this is a bit of a common topic for people to talk about, but it's also really true. That's why it's a common topic. Teacher talk time. So how long do you talk in class? Here we can see in the graph, in the top line, it says amount of time I think I spend talking in class. And then on the next line, it says the amount of time I think I should spend talking in class. What possibly we should then add to that is, once we've done our analysis, the amount of time I did spend talking in class. So, but even if we just look at this is, when we consider it, the majority of the teachers tend to be around that 40 to 60 mark. Some might even go into that 60 or 80 mark. I would really hope we wouldn't get into the 80 to the 100 mark, but it's not completely impossible. And then you compare it with the amount of time you think you should spend. But as I say, once we've done our recording and once we've analysed ourselves, or maybe it's not even through recording, though I really encourage you to try and record yourselves, or ask another teacher to record you, and then you do an analysis of that recording and see where you are on that chart. So what is it we're actually looking for? Well, we're looking for an amalgamation of good teaching practices. What does that mean? Well, here we can see some examples. We're looking at student-centered learning. Obviously, education is about learning, not about teaching. In history, that has been the other way around. People thought teaching was more important, but really it's learning, and it's quite obvious when you think about it. And to be able to do that, we need to empower the student. Now, traditionally also, the power struggle, the power balance between student and learner was very, very skewed. The teacher had all of the power. The teacher decided everything. And when you have a student who really just sits there and has to accept whatever that teacher decides, and I think this is something that we can really look for in critical reflection. How do we get that power back to that student? We also need to make learning visible, and this is one way to empower the students. Making learning visible by looking at the objectives as we've seen so far, using rubrics, sharing the rubrics with them so they understand how they're going to be evaluated and understand what criteria is being used to evaluate them. Increasing critical thinking, so you're using those higher order thinking skills we've looked at. You try and use that creating, try and use that evaluating, and try and use that analysis. Those three main HOTs that we talked about in Bloom's revised taxonomy, in that triangle we looked at. Obviously developing HOTs, which carry straight on from critical thinking, as I just mentioned. And motivating the students by encouraging them and motivating them, and they believe that they can really do this well, and they're encouraged to carry on learning. By providing scaffolding. Now, many of these techniques, scaffolding is a general term, but really scaffolding is good teaching. Again, it's just how to make sure the maximum number of our learners can do those tasks successfully. So what do you need to put in place to ensure that all those learners can complete those tasks successfully? And one of them, as we mentioned before, is making learning visible, and by using visible thinking, mind maps, graphic organisers, those kind of tools that really help us encourage learning in a visible way or visual way. And obviously paying attention to diversity, as I just mentioned, that's part of scaffolding, making sure that everybody can follow that course and that everybody is able to understand and complete it successfully. That's basically what scaffolding is about. Teacher talk. I mentioned earlier on, many teachers talk too much. So we really need to increase student interaction. Now, this is another way to empower the student. They're all interrelated, really. And another way is that a teacher uses display questions a lot. Many teachers use display questions very, very frequently in class. And they tend to be closed questions. The teacher knows the answer. What is da-da-da-da? Who is da-da-da-da-da? What is da-da-da-da? And you know the answer. It's either a yes-no question or it's a short answer question. And you're basically testing the student's knowledge. Did you study? Did you listen? Were you listening to me? And have you understood? And they're not real questions. Whereas when we look at referential questions, they are real questions. They're questions where the teacher doesn't know the answer. And I'm actually interested. By not knowing the answer, I'm displaying interest in you as a person, as a learner. I'm not just going through the rote practices of teaching. So what we want to avoid, basically, in the display, as we can see here, it's the what, the when, and the who. And really, in the referential, we're looking at the how and the why. Okay? Those are the ideas we want to go into. Open-ended questions, where you're really looking for development of critical thinking skills. And we've looked at this in many videos and many units. But all of these go towards empowering the student, and they open up their constructive teacher talk methods rather than closed methods that shut down that communication process, which is what we don't want. I hope that helps, and thank you for watching.